watching Morning at NTV.
Welcome back to Morning at NTV. At exactly 21 minutes past 8 a.m. we're getting into our techno segment, and this morning our conversation is going to move away from the physical health but onto something else, which is mental health. Now, information on mental health in our country is quite scanty because of stigma and fear. Some people don't report the problem because of the perception that mental health is not a medical problem but a traditionally related illness. Globally, the World Health Organization estimates about 10% of every population has suffered mental illness. Now, this implies that 10% of Uganda's 42 million population, I beg your pardon, which is about 4.2 million people, have dealt with some kind of mental illness, and this may be depression, anxiety, trauma, post-traumatic stress disorder, and substance abuse. Now, amid the corona pandemic, our conversation this morning is going to be taking a look at the discussion on mental health and in particular treating a psychologically battered nation. Now, to have this conversation, I am joined by Professor Edward Bantu, who is a counseling psychologist, Professor Peter Baguma, who is a psychologist, and also we have Peter Birungi, who is a first aid psychologist, or someone you could also call a counselor. Right behind me, as you can see, we're going to be starting the conversation. Good morning and welcome to Morning at NTV, gentlemen.
Good morning.
And welcome to Morning at NTV. Now, in our conversation, we'll be starting off with what exactly, as Uganda, where do we stand in terms of our statistics on mental health and just the perception of mental health within our country. I'll start off with you, Professor Baguma. Professor Baguma, can you hear me?
Can you speak up a bit?
Professor Baguma, can you hear me?
Yeah, you raised your voice a bit.
Well, it's as raised as it can possibly be. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Now, Professor, I would like to first of all understand, as a nation, we're saying dealing with a psychologically battered nation, but where do we stand as a country in terms of mental health?
Thank you very much. I'm Professor Peter Baguma from the School of Psychology, Makerere University. Allow me to start with a song. The song goes like this. Adui akija, sisi tuko tayari. Adui akija, sisi tuko tayari. Good morning, Ugandans. I think as the song goes, Uganda and Africa and the rest of the world have been invaded by the enemy, which is COVID-19. And as the song goes, we are sure we are going to defeat it. Especially Uganda, we are led with His Excellency, the President of Uganda, and the government. And I want to thank the leadership of the country and also the Ugandans for taking serious measures to fight this coronavirus. In terms of mental health, we are not doing well. We are not doing well because usually when a country is faced with such a serious stressor, many people suffer from psychosocial distress. So as we stand now in Uganda, many people, especially those in urban areas, we are undergoing what we call psychosocial distress. People are worried. There is a lot of fear. a lot of concern, a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety. So we are not in a good state psychosocially. Thank you.
The fact, Professor Baguma, that we are not in a good state, and one of the things is that there's psychosocial distress. How aware is our country, such as the citizens within the country, saying, being able to, first of all, say, it's understandable for you to be afraid at this point in time. How aware is our citizenry about this?
Come again?
How aware are the people in Uganda about things such as psychosocial distress, say panic attacks, fear of what is yet to come, the unknown, the uncertainties?
How aware are they?
Yes.
Yes, yes. Most people are aware of this stressor called the COVID. Majority are aware. Maybe what they are not aware of could be now the underlying psychological problems that are likely to come if this pandemic is not defeated.
Okay. Well, just to bring Professor Birungi, let's just go to Birungi to have a conversation with you, Birungi, on who is at risk of such, the psychosocial distress, who is at risk, and what are the telltale signs at this point in time that someone might be having psychosocial distress?
So I would like to look at it from different fronts. One of them being, is the person going through as a patient to COVID? Is the person taking care of someone with COVID? Also, is it a community where we picked someone from? You know, all these things are key. But as a whole, as a nation, we are all under lockdown, for example. And so that alone brings different dynamics to the equation, because people have been living a certain lifestyle. There are people who have been used to coping, for example, with going to social events. And now that has been already quarantined in a way. Yeah, so they cannot do that. However, the symptoms are things like anxiety. When you see people having sleep problems, digestive problems, now those are anxiety-related issues, lack of concentration. And where you've seen things like gender-based violence happening more, couples struggling, families struggling, all these relational difficulties can be telltale. Any failure to perform your occupational, social functioning can be a telltale. If it persists, the more it persists, the more likely it is that someone is really struggling. Yeah.
When you say that, when you have a look at someone doing something over and over, how long would you have to perhaps watch someone to realize that maybe something is wrong? Is it 2 days, 3 days? Do we wait for the entire lockdown at 35 days and we say there's something wrong? What is the quickest time that I can be able to tell that someone perhaps in my community, someone at home, or even just myself are dealing with something that has to do with mental health?
So Rita, if you spent a whole week and you cannot sleep, and it's not because you are busy doing something, but you try to sleep and you can't sleep, and you're struggling emotionally, you're sad the whole time. The moment it goes into 2 weeks, for example, for depression, that's already a telltale that you are having symptoms that could indicate that you're getting depressed. So time spans will differ for each of the disorders, but typically 2 weeks and beyond begins to become a telltale.
Okay. Well, taking it to Professor, one of the things Professor Baguma and also you have highlighted, Birungi, is that taking a look at the patients. Now, for some of the patients that have actually been released, they have recovered fully from COVID-19 and are being sent back into the communities. The issues that they might carry with them back into the community. Yes, they might be physically well, but how do we now start to gauge their mental health? Professor Baguma?
Yes, come again.
I am asking, what about the patients? Taking a look at the patients who have recovered, it's a good sign for our country. We're saying, well, we have done so much, we're winning this fight. But how are they mentally? What should the families start to look out for? And how do we comfortably bring them back into the community?
Yeah, I think there should be adequate preparation right from the time of discharge, adequate preparation of the family and the community where they are going to live. And if that is done, they are likely to settle down without much problems. But because you know there is the issue of stigma, and this being a new disease, and people are not understanding it well, the issue that those who have gone home are not being well received. So we need a lot of preparation involving the community leaders, involving the health personnel, to go and talk to the families, prepare the families and the communities, and so that they get prepared to receive the former patient.
Okay. Well, taking it to...
Yes?
Well, taking it to Birungi, I see him in argument in one way or another. For him to bring in, how would you prepare someone, say, if it is my partner or the head of the family who was part of this and they had now recovered, but we have children and the community might know that you were taken away for this. How do you deal with preparing yourself, and when they come back home, how do you go through that process till everything normalizes?
I think one of the things, I love to come at these things looking at the general person, because as a human being, you have who you want to be, who you've always wanted to be. For example, if you are the father and you are sick, remember, my effort would be to remind you and bring you back to the place of you are still the father. And still you want to be that father, that caring father. So whilst people may not understand, whilst you feel all these hard feelings about being away and how much you've lost while you were away and the judgment, and you feel judged or not accepted, you need, I will try to anchor the person back into their basic goals in life of, I am a caring father. So how can I continue being that caring father, even though I feel like I failed or somehow didn't perform as I should have performed, or let down my family, because all these are possible thought disturbances why someone is getting depressed or anxious. A lowered self-esteem is likely. So you want to repair, help them come back to the place where they see themselves as the major thing being that they are the father, and they're still the father, and they can still be caring. How can they be caring even with these feelings ongoing within them? It should be to encourage a resilience over thought, over feelings, over the hardships of the season. Now, when I go to the side of the family, if you're the mother, if you're the wife, and you're receiving back a husband, you need to know that what do you want to be as a wife? Do you want to be a caring wife? So how can you show and stay caring even though you are nursing someone who has been unwell or are receiving him back? So the focusing is on us making the first things remain the first things. Let family focus on being family. Truly, that's where the strength is. And communities, to remain communities, we are a caring people. Ugandans are known for being very hospitable, and we are very caring generally. On the big side of things, we are very hospitable. We receive our guests well, we take care of one another. These are community virtues that you want to encourage the community to continue to exemplify and extend to the people who have been in quarantine and are being returned. So a multi-pronged approach needs to be adopted to promote these, and that's where I would advise for psychosocial services to be mainstream for all communities, really, and families who are receiving people who are coming back.
All right. And at this point in time, could any of you be able to tell me where we stand in terms of our psychosocial support as a country? How prepared are we in saying we have set up perhaps a number of counseling areas? And this is in case even if you're not a patient or a part of the family of a patient, you're just any person at this point in time who's dealing with anxiety. Because one thing that you shared, Professor Baguma, was the fact that right now as a country we're not doing so well in terms of mental health in this time.
Thank you very much, presenter. There are two issues here. First of all, the number of trained psychosocial experts is not yet big. But we are solving that problem. The experts are limited. Another issue is government policy. Normally, the role of psychologists is not yet well appreciated in Uganda. So even the few we have are not well appreciated because there is limited policy. The policy doesn't spell out the role of the psychologist in the community and how they should be employed. So the psychosocial services availability is not yet at the level that we would like it to be. So those are the two issues that I see regarding psychosocial services. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Baguma. Now, to bring you in, Peter, he has mentioned the fact that we do not have the right, in terms of professionals, we don't have enough in the country, and also just taking a look at if I am home. You mentioned earlier the gender-based violence cases going up in homes, children are being beaten more, and this could just be a reflection of stress that the parents are putting onto the children or one partner is putting onto another partner. So we do not have enough professionals in the country, but how if I am the one who is being beaten, or if I'm the one who might be in a home where I see someone in one way or another transmitting stress physically, beating someone else, what do I do? How do I deal with this?
I think one of the things you want to do is to utilize the channels that are available to you in the immediate. For example, most communities have a way of arbitrating conflicts. That's at level one. I think the immediate thing that the person in the village down there could use is to go to the senior women, senior men in that village and get them involved in these issues. But we have professional ways of dealing with these things. Unfortunately, our population is not very aware. For example, right now, Professor Baguma and Professor Bantu and myself are trying to run an online training for a few of our students who are going to be ready to provide psychological first aid. And we have another doctor at also been training summer in second year, summer in third year. They've learned something called interpersonal psychotherapy. All these are good in professional techniques for dealing with these issues, because interpersonal therapy deals with conflicts, disagreements, life change, and all those things at a more therapeutic level. But psychological first aid is the first go-to. When violence has just happened, what do you need to walk in with? Psychological first aid. So all these things are good, but we have few professionals, and even where they are, as Professor said, little is done to notice what they're doing or utilize it, or even mainstream it to the public to receive it. So if you are being battered, you will need to know where these people are, first of all, for you to even make a call, or to afford them sometimes, because sometimes we can be seen at a private level as well, but that will be at a pace sometimes, and sometimes we are doing pro bono cases for where clients really cannot afford. You may want to do pro bono, and we do that as well. So in the immediate, we are preparing psychological first aid. for people.
Of those
Rita?
patients, as we wrap up this conversation, one of the things we have mentioned, we have
Yes.
talked about the patients, we have talked about the community at large. But I want us to focus on one group as we end this, and that is health workers. And I'll start off with you, Professor Baguma. Health workers who are at the forefront of all of this. Around the world, we're applauding them. We're saying thank you so much. We're doing all we can. But let's take a look at the mental toll that this is taking on health workers in our country in particular.
Yes.
I'll start off with you, Professor Baguma. Professor Baguma, can you hear me? Well, I'll go to you, Peter. I think you have had the question.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes, I have. So mental health workers have been found, because they are working with a very heavy workload, and remember that their working conditions are the same. We have not. Looks like Professor wants to speak.
No, do go on. We'll be engaging with the professor in just a bit.
Okay. So acute stress disorders are very likely for them because they're working under stressful conditions, heavy workload. They're also going through the situation, economic situation, the way all of us are going through it, but they have a load which won't give them room to take or not take. They have to deal with emergencies. They have to see a lot of suffering and sometimes a lot of death and a lot of distress. Really, they meet it first front. So acute stress disorders are likely for them. Burnout in the long run, and some of them have already been overloaded even before this came. So we've just added another burden on top of what they already had. Okay, and then so their work performance is likely to suffer if nothing is done to support them well. And depending on how their personal coping mechanisms, some people use a lot of avoidance techniques. So things like alcohol abuse, drugs, and things like that is very likely on their side. And because of deaths and being at the forefront of seeing life-threatening incidences, post-traumatic stress symptoms and disorders are likely for them as well. Yeah? And these have been found really in other scientific studies already being done around the globe about health workers who have intervened with this instance. These have been seen. Even with previous scourges like Ebola and Marburg, it was found 3 years later, these things are alive in the health service provider. So we want to help. It would be nice for all implementing agencies, government, and all who can support assistance to the workers.
Well, thank you so much,
And
Peter. Yes, you can add, Professor.
Yes, another issue to do with the health workers is what we call fear of contagion. Many health workers fear that they could contract the illnesses from the patients. And this is very serious. It brings stigma, discrimination, and it affects the quality of service that the health workers would be able to provide. So to deal with this fear of contagion, we recommend the provision of PPEs, personal protective equipment, so that the health workers feel safe and secure to interact with the patients.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Otherwise, we are happy so far with our health workers. They are doing a good job. What they need is support.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Professor Baguma. One thing that Peter had highlighted was the fact that there are also long-term effects of this later on for our country and the world altogether. But as we wrap up, Peter, I'd just like you in 1 minute to just summarize for anyone who's watching and has realized that maybe I have anxiety, I have fear of what is to come, I might be hiding myself in a drink that I could be taking just to avoid my feelings. What would you tell someone who's watching?
My advice, first of all, is that they access the nearest healthcare provider. Go to the nearest health center, go to the nearest health service, and receive help. For most of these things, there are possible treatments, there are possible protocols, there are things that can be done to help. And the health center can link you to other service provider. Now, we have mental health departments in all our major referrals. In Kampala, for example, Butabika has clinicians. It has from psychiatrists to clinical psychologists and medical social workers and general social workers. They're all there. All these people can provide some kind of help. And if they are overburdened, they know where to seek more assistance from. Okay? I've already said that at the university level, we have students who can handle. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much, Peter, for joining us on this conversation this morning.